nobody knew where it had come from. There was just this moment I realised that David was crying behind the camera. I didn't really know what had kind of overtaken in that moment. The room was just agog with like this kind of quietness that had suddenly erupted. And as I drove back, then I knew that the next part of my personal mission, Women on a Mission, was about helping women not to be small.
Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of How'd You End Up Doing That with me, Alex Jeffers. This podcast is all about chatting to people about the weird and wonderful ways they've ended up where they currently are. This week's episode is with Sue Revell, who started a career in healthcare and has ended up as a coach, a leadership coach. She runs a podcast and she does a couple of other things as well, which are quite interesting. She describes it as a portfolio career, which I think is quite a nice way to describe it, actually. I'd never met Sue before we recorded this podcast, so her introduction to me was where I joined the call a minute or two early and then was just spinning on my chair to sort of pass the time, which we laughed about quite a bit, but I forgot to press record while we were chatting about the ridiculousness of a man spinning on his chair while she joins the call, so we kind of lost that bit, but there is a reference to the comedy intro at a couple of points throughout the recording. It was really fascinating having Sue on the podcast and having a chat with her, and really nice as well to have some variety in the guests that I've had on the podcast, because as I'm sure some people have noticed, they've been all men up until this point. But yeah, it was great to have a bit of variety and have that variation in podcast guests talking about their career. So yeah, I won't chat for too much longer. We'll dive right in. But all I will say is I'll drop some of the links to things that Sue talks about in the episode description. And if you want to get in touch with me, same as always, just drop me an email to alex@howdyou.com. HOWDYOU.com. And I'll take a look or pass things over to Sue. So yeah, without much further ado, let's jump straight into our call. Just talked about my damp, my fancy new camera since.
It's one hell of an intro, though.
But thank you very much for coming on the podcast. How'd you end up doing that?
Thank you for inviting me.
No worries at all. No worries at all. So I guess first and foremost, do you want to introduce yourself? Give us a bit of an introduction, a summary, an elevator pitch for Sue.
Oh my word. Okay, an elevator pitch. How can I elevate myself after that introduction? So I am a personal leadership coach, a podcast host and founder, I should say. I'm also an experienced non-exec director and an occasional guest lecturer, if occasional and guest don't mean the same thing. And I'm also the director of strategy and communication at Practise Solutions, which is a leading Wales-based consultancy that helps public sector organisations to transform their services. So I have, I guess, the shortest version I could have said is I have a portfolio career, which is something I was really keen to achieve, and over the last few years have made that happen.
Okay, so the idea of a portfolio career being lots of varied but similar sort of avenues at which you are pursuing, not through the same industry and not kind of doing the same job for 5 different people, but doing 5 different jobs that kind of work for you as a person that you can build upon. Sort of,
yeah, they're different jigsaw pieces that come together to build the picture of Sue, I think.
Yeah, that's great.
And mean that I get to make a difference in a whole range of areas, and that's something that's really important to me.
It seems quite important to you because I've been, this isn't creepy at all, but I have been. Well, no, but that's just what you do, isn't it? You look people up on LinkedIn.
I stalk all my guests.
So we'll kind of run on to, the amazing stuff you're doing now, the 101st episode of your podcast.
Yeah, Women on a Mission.
Yeah, and then you very abruptly stopped.
Having reached the 100, it was time for a break, and life got a bit busy for a while. So this is why I make a public apology for those episodes I've got recorded that need to be shared. So it's part 2 of season 7 is coming very soon.
That's fine. It's fine. I was looking through the dates of them earlier, and I was like, "There's 1 week, 100." And
well, thanks for sharing that, Alex. That makes me feel so much better.
It's what I aim to do, is make people
You don't
feel.
just walk, you make people feel great when they arrive through the door.
I do. I really do. It's what I pride myself on.
It's a skill.
This is
It's definitely a skill.
not creepy at all, but I have been looking you up on LinkedIn, and I can see you started your career as a practice nurse.
Yeah. It does go back a little beyond that, I suppose, but, I'd say that's where my accidental management career started.
Can you, I guess, talk us through? We normally do start around about school sort of age. What sort of qualifications did you leave school with? How did you find? What was your sort of your ambition at that point of like being released into the great wide world of?
Oh, that's really interesting. I hope it's interesting anyway. Otherwise, we'll have a very short conversation. I grew up in Plymouth, not a Welsh girl, but I've definitely adopted Wales. Just for any doubters, love Wales, absolutely adore being here. Do you know? If I'm really honest, Alex, as I was thinking about questions I knew you would ask, it makes me a little sad because I realised that I don't have a great deal of memories of times before my dad died. So my dad died when I was 14, so that was a pretty pivotal point in terms of growing up, as I'm sure you'd imagine. And so those last couple of years at school went terribly happy ones. And I left school. You said qualifications, so I left school with 5 O levels. The important thing about that, though, and I always like to pay tribute to one particular teacher because I didn't like school very much. There was a really, really important, as I say, quite pivotal point from a whole career trajectory point of view. In that, at that point where you are making decisions about which O levels to take, I was really rubbish at science. Beyond rubbish. And when it got to, and I wasn't much better at maths, and I would sit, but I would try, and I'd sit in the front of the class with my friend Joanne. We'd sit and we'd listen intently, and at the end, whenever the teacher was going to set work for the group, she'd say, class, turn to page 36. Susan and Joanne, I'll be back to you in a moment. And this patient woman would retell everything that she'd just taught in words of less than one syllable if she could. She did everything that she could to help us understand. And when it got to the maths mock O level, I got 11%. And there were some very serious conversations being had. And it was decided I should ditch the other things I wasn't great at, science, that was a win, and concentrate on maths. So every week, this woman would set extra work. I would do extra work. She would mark it and encourage me. She was absolutely incredible. When those results dropped through the letterbox, because that's what happened in those days,
Yeah.
I got a B for my O level, courtesy only of Miss Monk and my years of effort by that point. And I had no intention at that point in my life, which is why I share the story, what I wanted to do. And as you say, I went on to become a nurse. Now, I would never ever have entered the nursing profession without a science or without a maths O level. If she hadn't done all that she did to get me through that point in my education, my whole career would never have followed in the way that it did. Miss Monk was an amazing, amazing teacher. I've no idea if she's still with us,
Okay.
but wherever I get the chance to thank her, I always do, because without her, my career wouldn't have taken the path it did, which is extraordinary.
I think that's really interesting that some people's experience of school kind of is not defined by a single teacher, but enhanced so much by having that one teacher that's believed in them and really pushed them forward and driven them on to, given them that sense of belief and made them feel like they can do it. Whereas I never had that. I just had a lot of teachers who were like, yeah, he's all right. He can. I feel like a lot of the time my natural aptitude for science and maths was my downfall in that I was quite good at it at GCSE, but not good enough by the time we got to A level. So came out of GCSEs straight A's, went into A levels straight U's.
Oh my word!
Because I just sort of misplaced confidence, I suppose you could call it. Of
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't try very hard for my GCSEs. I didn't have to try very hard. I just knew this stuff. I could do it. I could do it. And then hit A levels, and it was wow. This is so much more difficult. But
It's not in my blood after all.
I'm work at this. I'm not going to work at this. I should just be able to do it. Come on. I'm just going to rock up to the exams and I'm going to wing it on the day. And it did not work out well. it
No.
was a disaster.
Ah.
But yeah, I think that it is always good to hear that other people have had that more positive experience at school and they've had those teachers that have driven them forwards and made it made it possible for them to get into the roles that they've ended up in. So yeah, nursing. So what kind of made you think that's the thing for me?
It's really, and again, that's another great question because my father almost certainly died through medical negligence. So
Okay.
I would never, ever have considered that that was a profession that I would end up in.
Hmm.
And I left school. I actually went to the College for Further Education. I was out of school as quickly as I could, 16, out the door. Had no interest in A levels. Went off to College of Further Education, started a secretarial course. Hated that, but did learn to touch type, which has been an incredibly helpful skill. So those only lasted there 3 months. And that was definitely worth it, though, because I got that
Mhm.
one skill. I wish I could have remembered shorthand, but that didn't stick. But typing, fantastic. Who knew that
Okay.
could be so useful? And then I went to work for the Milk Marketing Board, where I was and I don't believe they exist anymore. One would hope not anyway, a comptometer operator where I added up milk yields all day, every day, which
Uh,
became quite a competitive skill.
Sorry, what is a comptometer?
So it's basically an adding machine.
Okay.
And we would sit there and type in numbers of milk statements that came in from the dairy farms all day. And the person who got through the most statements, yeah. So we were really, there were only three of us that did it. And we were very, very competitive. And the lead for that section was really fast. It's funny the things you can learn that you're competitive doing. None of my friends will be surprised, but I never thought of myself as a competitive person, and would still argue I'm not. But then I think back to those days and go, okay, maybe. But it was interesting because I was in a room full of women all day, every day for probably 2 years. They all brought such different experiences into the office. I'm not suggesting all those conversations were positive, but
Okay.
I just learned a lot about human beings, human nature, what was important to people. It wasn't the most fulfilling of things, but I think it definitely launched my interest in human behavior. And I think it was that need for something more fulfilling and therefore needing to start to think more seriously about the future that took me into voluntary work. I'd gone to visit a sick uncle in hospital, sat there for a whole visiting time and thought, this is quite fascinating. Now I've got an interest in humans and how they communicate and how things work. Being
Hmm.
in a hospital only enhanced that observational interest, I guess. And so I went off to be a voluntary worker. And I signed up to do something like 10 till 12 on a Saturday morning. And within a few months, I found I was doing 10 till 2, 10 till 4, 10 till 6,
Yeah,
10
yeah.
till 10. Oh, I'll come back on Sunday. Do you need me on Sunday? I could do Sunday. I kind of almost moved in. I mean, these days, it would be shocking what I was allowed to do. But, we're talking some time ago and it was all hands on deck. In fact, maybe we're going back to that. It was, I had the most incredible experience. And applying to do my nurse training was just a natural next step in many ways. I got
Okay.
great feedback from that role. So when people started to encourage me, I didn't really take much encouragement.
Makes a lot of sense. I can see where the sort of the interest in people definitely comes from then, and
Mm.
the that kind of desire to want to get involved in that and be around people. Voluntary work, being in these sorts of environments, you definitely get to speak to a lot of people, and yeah, I can sort of see how nursing. I don't know if I would have made nursing as the next sort of logical step. I don't know what I would have thought of doing at the time, actually. But I've never had that sort of desire to. Sounds bad. Never had that desire to help people.
Not everybody can have the same calling in life, Alex. That's fine.
Yeah, it's just the way that it sounds really brutal when I say things like I just didn't want to help people. There's a certain level of responsibility and pressure, I think, on that level of those sorts of jobs, healthcare, teaching. There's a definite level of expectation and pressure that you can't turn up to work hungover.
That's definitely
It, it's
a
it's
helpful requirement.
it's a core thing there, and I think when I was younger, that was not in my remit of things. You know,
I think I had a few colleagues who struggled, but
yeah, you're 18, 20, 25, being 30, being able to turn up to work that a little bit hungover, and there's no pressure. You can make mistakes, and no one's going to die.
yeah, that is definitely another difference.
So, nursing training, you entered into it, and
Loved it.
yeah,
Absolutely loved it. You did something different every 8 weeks,
okay,
which sets you up for a career of, struggling to stay anywhere. But 8 weeks, you get in, you have a really good look at what's going on in that particular specialty. learn as much as you can in that 8 weeks, soak it up, back into school, consolidate that, and on to the next thing. I loved it, and I'm only half joking when I say it does set you up for a career where change is not as threatening as the average person finds it, because that's where you've spent your most formative working years, is changing every 8 weeks. You get in, you get to know people, you say goodbye, and you move on. And I absolutely loved my training. Best 3 years. Didn't love every area. I think it'd be a bit weird if you did love all of the clinical areas, but those areas I loved. I loved psychiatry. I loved theatres, which is really odd in itself, isn't it? I like people when they're awake and when they're not. But I just loved, and there were certain areas that you just fall in love with and think, oh, maybe I'll come back, and then life takes a different turn again. But it was a wonderful experience training.
Yeah, how did you find the sort of the getting into sort of doing that? Because you said you left school, no A levels, you didn't do the more formal higher education,
Mm.
um, that sort of thing. When you were coming to then be applying to be a nurse, did that come up as a barrier, or was it something that there was not so much of a kind of a block in the way to getting in there?
No, I mean, I think probably then as now, different schools had different, requirements. So, maybe I don't remember the detail. I'm sure there were schools that I would not have had, as higher qualifications as they would like, and therefore wouldn't have met their cut. I really had an interest in moving to Bristol. I'm not sure why. What my fascination was in Bristol, and I did very quickly get interviews for Chichester, which would have been a very different life again,
Yeah.
Bristol and Plymouth. Those were the three centres that I applied to, and I was lucky to be shortlisted for interview at all three and offered places in all three,
Oh, fantastic.
but just at different timescales. So then I went with the one that was the best in terms of timescale,
Right.
and headed off to Bristol for the next what was to be 20 years. I didn't know that obviously at the time, but I was there quite a long time.
I love Bristol, absolutely
Mm,
adore Bristol. If I could
mm.
live anywhere else other than Cardiff, it would be Bristol.
Yeah, it's a fantastic city.
Yeah, it's so there's just such an energy to the place. I think that you don't
Yeah,
get with a lot of other places. It's I love Cardiff because it's compact and small and very much it feels like home. That's why I love it. But London has always seemed to very imposing, very big, very
yeah, I get you.
hustle bustle. There's it's London, Manchester, Birmingham. They've always seemed quite I don't know too big.
Yeah,
Not able to settle down, not able to find roots. But Bristol is it's such an in between city of
yeah.
um, and the culture, the creativity, the history of music and arts and everything else that comes out of Bristol. I've just loved, but yeah, I never. The plan was to move there eventually, but yeah,
Oh, was it?
Cardiff's home now.
Um,
With two kids.
okay. That probably does feel very like home.
Yeah. So yeah, you moved to Bristol, do your training in nursing there, and then you just go straight into nursing.
Yeah, I had various ward-based roles for a few years, which were great. Again, it goes back to what I said about the training. I think you get so used to moving very quickly. I followed a very similar pattern in my early career, not 8 weeks, but kind of 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then I would move and get experience somewhere else until I became a practice nurse. And it was really interesting at first being out in the community, so different to hospital life. I was definitely ready for that change. I worked with a great practice of medics, a really interesting group of practice nurses who were so much older than me with very, very different experience and expectations. But again, you find a way to work alongside people, and
Mhm.
eventually they realized that I also had skills and wasn't just the baby of the team. I did have things to offer. And the first 6 months, I absolutely loved there. There was a lot to learn, a lot of, I guess, a lot of routine to learn. As I got past that 6 month stage, I realised there really wasn't very far further for me to go. At that stage, there was not the segregation in role types that there now is in general practice. I was probably a year or two ahead of the developments that then followed. Being a very, very foolishly honest person, went into work one day and said, I'm not talking immediately, but I am saying I won't be here forever. I think the time has come for me to take a gentle look at what's going on back in hospital life. And later that same day, I was called back to the office and told that because they couldn't afford to lose the income that my particular role brought into the practice, I could either choose to have 3 months' notice that day or a month's notice when they found my replacement. But my job was in the paper that night. It was it was brutal. I might have a better understanding of that now, but I didn't then. And then followed this kind of mass chase to try and find a role that suited my career profile and trajectory. And it was a bit of a challenge to say the least, because I'd kind of been out of hospital life long enough that I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back in at a higher grade very easily, and nobody would put you into a lower graded job because they knew you wouldn't stay as soon as you could get a promotional level. So I had a really interesting time applying for jobs, and in the end, because nothing was happening, I ended up applying for a job that was considerably senior to the one that I'd left on. And didn't get the one that day, but that gave me the feedback gave me the confidence to apply for another job that was in the paper that night. And I did get that one. So I suddenly found myself in a clinical management role, which I kind of boldly just worked my way through out of the practice and back into hospital life, despite walking up the stairs one day to my then employer and heard them saying, "Oh dear, she won't have got it, will she? What does she know about managing people? This is going to be terrible," as I walked in with my beautifully written envelope and handed them my notice. And that day they appointed my replacement. It was that tight. But we parted as friends as best as one could. With a great reference, and off I went into hospital life, where I learnt about managing people for the first time. I'd had senior roles in teams, but not been the responsible person, and had a role, managing senior nursing staff and also influencing a much broader range of clinicians than I was used to, because I was managing all of outpatient services. And that in itself was an interesting leap from general practice. It's not that odd. It's not that strange a leap. It's just much bigger and more complex.
A lot of people can sort of imagine the day to day of a nurse, although it's it can be so varied. You sort of
Mm.
understand the ins and outs of nursing, caring for people. In terms of like a manager of nurses, what does that look like? What's the sort of the day to day there?
It's a lot of meetings. Most people would probably recognise that in any management role. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of planning, a lot of meetings, a lot of organising people's rotas. So through those, I think I had 4 departments across Bristol, and across those, we probably had something like 40 different consultants at that point using those outpatient clinic suites at any point in time. So it was, ensuring that actually we had staff that were appropriately skilled and trained to support those consultants and their teams coming in using services, looking to make sure that we were offering as kind of modern and up to date a service. It was at the time where outpatient services were really trying to transform. I'm really taxing my brain. I think it was Leicester that had done some really amazing work in how they modernised outpatient services. And so we wanted to be hot on the heels of the work that they had done. So there was a lot of looking, what could we learn from other people? What could we bring to Bristol and do things differently that meant that patients got more and better services, and that consultants were able to do more and differently by nurses taking on more responsibility. The challenge was that nurses, certainly at that time, who worked in outpatient services, weren't necessarily there, and this is a very bold and sweeping statement, but not all the staff who were there would have been there to modernise and improve themselves. Many of them were at a different stage in their career. They didn't want some bumptious 30-year-old kind of trying to modernise anything that moved. And so we'd have some really interesting challenges, or so I thought, because then I was seconded to go and manage general services, which is all non-clinical services in a hospital. That's when I learned what resistance really looks like to change. I will never, ever, ever forget that experience. I was in my office on the first day. I had this beautiful round wooden table, and my management team came in for the first meeting. The first thing that you noticed was they were all more than old enough to be my father. They were all male, and I somehow brazened out my first meeting looking as though I was the most confident thing in the world. And then at the end, 2 of them said, "Can we have a chat?" So I said, "Yes, of course." And one of them said, "We just want you to know we think they've gone mad this time." So I said, "Oh, can I ask who are they?" "The management." So I said, oh, and how have the management gone mad? Putting a woman in charge and a nurse. What does a nurse know about running a hospital? And
Wow.
so there I was, my first day, rabbit in headlights, well and truly well and truly formed. As I said, can I just say thank you, gentlemen? I really appreciate you telling me honestly how you feel. I can only hope that during my time here, I helped, I changed that impression. But I do genuinely appreciate your honesty. And as they left the room, I remember I could almost have sunk to the floor, just in that moment of, right, okay, let's get started.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it
What a
was
way to
oh,
start your.
it was a really extraordinary well, it was meant to be 3 months, and I was actually there nearly a year, and
Okay.
I must be very fair and finish the story. Well, actually, there were 2 further steps to the story. One is that on my last day, those same 2 gentlemen came to see me, and they said, "We've just come to tell you we got it wrong. We couldn't have got it more wrong. You have been the best manager we have worked with. And if we've ever not got our own way, interesting language, if we've ever not got our own way, it's always been because we haven't set our case out well enough. You have listened every time we have approached you, and you have been amazing to work with." So that was lovely because I really appreciated them coming back, and they didn't need to do that. That I just simply been me, done the best that I could and tried to be fair to everybody in often very different and challenging circumstances. But it's the bit that's really quite emotional about that story is if it's many years later, actually, because it was when I was now living in Cardiff, I was driving it through Sainsbury's car park in Thornhill one morning. I don't know why I was there. I must have been on leave because otherwise I would not have been there on a Wednesday morning or whatever it was. And as I drove through the car park, I thought, oh, there's this person. And then I thought, oh God, don't be ridiculous. You live in Cardiff now, not Bristol. Of course it's not him. It just made something inside me, made me drive around again. And I wound down the window and I called out his name and he looked at me. And I said, it is you, isn't it? So he said, and he was looking really quizzically. And I said, it's Sue Revell. And he said, oh, it's amazing to see you. I've got about 6 weeks to live. And so, to be able to just exchange a moment and to wish him a peaceful, departure from this world was just one of the most incredible experiences I think I'll ever have, because there were so many ways in which that may never have happened. It was such a random moment in a different city in a different point of the week, so long afterwards. And to have that moment just to say hello and goodbye was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. I have so many fond memories of that really bizarre start, to that relationship.
Yeah, I think, well, it's kind of good that you look on it that way, because I think if that was me, I would not be quite so fond of those memories, and probably on the last day it would have been less of a, oh, thank you, you didn't have to, I'm very appreciative of you coming and saying that to me. It would have been more jog on. Told you I could do a good job. Maybe that's just me.
I didn't know. Somebody had put their faith in me to do
Okay.
a good job, and
Yeah.
I didn't know. Who knew I could have screwed it up and met their expectations? If anything, they gave me they probably gave me not the wherewithal to do it. That's inside of me, but
Mm.
they probably gave me the focus and the determination to make sure I did a darn good job. Actually,
Was it maybe coded language there for them saying a nurse? Did they actually mean a woman?
but they said
Um,
both.
oh,
No, they
sorry.
did say both.
Oh, they
They
said
did
both.
say both.
Sorry, I
A
thought you said
woman and a
a
nurse.
woman and I thought you said
Oh
young.
yeah,
I
no, it
thought it was
was.
young and a nurse, right?
No, they didn't shy off. They went with both.
Oh, they just blatant.
Let's throw them all in.
Would you say that was something that, I guess, at the time? Because what sort of year are we looking at for
Oh
this now?
crikey, where was I? That would have been mid-90s.
Mid-90s. So I get, from my I say my memory of the mid-90s. I was 5 in the
Yeah, thank
mid-90s.
you. I feel
Um,
great now.
I just look really old.
I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna be nice.
Um, yeah, sort of my view on culturally significant television and films and things like that, it made it seem like that would have been much less of an issue in the mid 90s as maybe it would have been in maybe the 70s
Yes.
and 80s.
Yeah. No,
So
I
it's
would say it was almost expected.
right.
Um,
It's yeah, again,
I was definitely an unusual fixture
okay.
in that role. There was a really a day that I always look back on and smile. I remember doing I hadn't done many disciplinary hearings, for instance,
Okay.
and I was doing before I had to go and do this disciplinary hearing. I was on a site walkabout, looking at the state of the buildings and stuff with my contemporary in estates. This young guy, I don't know how old he'd have been, 20s, as we were up about, clearly fancied himself a bit and winked at me as we were out on the walk. And you know what I'm going to say, because half an hour later, there's a knock on the door of my office for this disciplinary. There's me and somebody from personnel sat there waiting to receive this young worker. And in walks this young lad who's winked at me half an hour earlier, which I thought was hilarious. And I genuinely, you're going to think I'm so soft. I genuinely felt hugely sorry for him because I could not imagine how he must have felt in that moment. No, we'd done half an hour earlier. I don't remember what the offence or the punishment was, but oh, it was so funny. It was such a funny moment. There were many in that particular job. I've many happy and humorous memories from that particular appointment,
Yeah, it sounds like it was a not perfect, but you can look back with it at some level of mirth.
and learning,
Yes.
and learning, and that's what jobs are about, aren't they? I think you get what you can out of them, make the difference that you can, and move on to what's next for you. So.
Speaking of which, good link. What was next?
There were a few kind of, am I going back to nursing? Am I not going back to nursing? What's the next plan after that secondment? A little while later, I applied for a job at the Children's Hospital in Bristol. And it was a really, really different job this time. It was organising the transfer and removal from the old hospital to the new hospital. So, a job that most people would never have the opportunity to be involved in, most people didn't know how to do, including me. It was so completely different and off the scale to most jobs that get advertised. And I like a challenge, as you'll have gathered. So I applied, was shortlisted down to 4 that were interviewed, went through a really, really robust all day interview process. And I was the lucky person who got the job and had the most amazing 4 years working at the Children's Hospital in Bristol, with incredible people doing extraordinary work. Yeah, and my job was to lead there were over 60 different working groups working on different aspects of planning and moving a hospital. And yeah, it was the most fascinating, the most challenging, probably the most rewarding because you can't screw it up. People often say to me, "You don't believe in imposter syndrome," and it's like, no, because I've gone for jobs generally that I can't afford to screw up. So I can. I've always just, and this is a really perfect example of that, I suppose. I just think if you go for jobs that are really challenging and you are honest about your capability and your capacity for development, then it's not in anybody's best interest. They might kick you, they might kick your ass a few times, but no one can afford for you to fail. And this was one of those jobs. There were some interesting moments along the way. I remember going to Birmingham because Birmingham Children's Hospital had been opened a little while, and I met with their equivalent of my role in Birmingham. And he sort of, there used to be 4 of us, and now I'm the only one left. And they'd all met with some very interesting and quite sad fates in some cases. I remember coming back that day thinking, "Oh my word, what does the future look like if 4 people couldn't withstand the onslaught of such a job?" But it was utterly, utterly fascinating. No 2 days were the same. Everything from tendering for removals companies, working with removals companies to move a whole hospital, working with staff, parents, everybody involved in a feat like that was an extraordinary experience.
Because to me, I would have said that someone with a sort of a strong logistical background and a sort of a history of working in operations.
And we have all of those people. Of course, no one person could do that sort of role on their own. You are coordinating that team. You're bringing the people together to help do that planning, to make that decision. You're like the hospital spokesperson working with a range of experts who bring the whole move together.
Yeah, so it's very much again tying into your earlier what you were saying earlier about the people aspect of it. You are the sort of the go between the people to make sure that all of the people are
Are
communicating
doing the
properly.
work. Yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
sort
they're
of.
doing the work in their departments that tie up with what what we planned that everybody else needed to have in place in order for the move to be, on time, within budget, delivered safely, celebrated at the other end, really. Quite an incredible feat.
So, did you not miss nursing at this point, or did you?
No, I think I was ready for the challenge. For some part of that, possibly the first couple of years, I was still doing some agency nursing. So I was able to do temporary work. If I wanted to to keep my hand in, which I did for a period of time, and to maintain my registration, then I had the option of working, doing some agency work to do that. It's also always good for bringing in some extra money. So for some time, I did both. Not frequently, but enough to maintain my skills. And then I kind of realized that actually I had made the right leap. I was enjoying general management. I liked project management. I'm good with people. The skills that I had honed, and I still say now, from a coaching point of view, I still say that those skills around micro communication were honed as a nurse without any doubt in my mind at all. Yeah, you learn so much working with humans, and particularly humans who are sick or in pain or suffering at any level, and that's both the person in the bed and the people around them. Your insight into human behaviour is second to none, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's a part of nursing that you don't. I mean, I don't ever consider is the people not in the bed, um,
Yeah,
the people sat on the chair. So yeah, you've kind of come out of that, and I guess presumably the hospital moved. Everything went according to plan, and I suppose you're in a position where what's next?
yeah. I stayed on and managed part of children's services for a while, and then Cardiff advertised a job to manage children's services and to open the children's hospital for Wales. So there was an opportunity to do it all over again, but from a different perspective. This time I was managing the team who would deliver the move, but obviously it brought the experience that I'd had in Bristol. The scale in Cardiff was different. We were looking at the first phase as opposed to a whole hospital move, so it was different, but there were also similar challenges in many ways. And by then I'd kind of fallen in love with working in children's services because the people are generally there for all the right reasons. It's a I won't say it's a fun place to be because nobody wants a child to be sick, but it's a great place for teamwork and extraordinary medicine and nursing care. So that's what brought me to Cardiff. I did have that at a personal level. I was thinking, interesting, given our conversation about Bristol earlier, it's like if I don't move now, I'll never move, and that wouldn't have been a bad thing. I just knew I would have stayed in Bristol. So I came to Cardiff, taught myself a little bit about rugby because I realised if you didn't, you couldn't talk to anybody on a Monday morning. So having never watched a game of rugby in my life, decided that was probably something worth investing some time in. Yeah, fell in love with Wales, I guess, over a period of time. And had various roles here, all in general. I know I went back into clinical work. They were all kind of progressions on the theme of general management or project management, moving into kind of planning strategy. Yeah, all sorts of roles over the next kind of 10 years, really, 10, 12 years. And somewhere in that time, I remember walking out of closing the front door one morning, somewhere just after my 40th birthday, and thinking, there's a second half of my career. And is this what I want to be doing for the second half? And knowing that I didn't, it was kind of a real, just that strong sense of it's probably time for something different. Had no idea what different looked like. I just knew that I didn't want to do another 20 years. So
Was that I guess, like a comforting thought that you had come to the realization you wanted to do something different, or did you feel like it was a bit of a scary thought, knowing you didn't want to do what you were currently doing?
that's a great question. I don't think it was either because I think it was such a, oh, I didn't know I thought that. It was a bit of a jolt of where on earth did that come from for a while. It wasn't like I'd been unhappy. It wasn't like I felt that something was missing. I liked the people I worked with. I'd always had good colleagues, worked in interesting roles. My public sector career was great, but there was just something about do I want another 20 years? Do I want to repeat it for another 20 years? And just that sense that as somebody who likes change, who likes things to be different, maybe it was time to start thinking. And I did nothing active with it.
Wouldn't make that mistake again. Wouldn't actively go and tell people you were thinking of leaving.
No, I'd learned that the hard way. And somewhere in all of that, I did some academic study. So, and I can't remember where that all follows in terms of chronological order. We talked about London. I never wanted to live there, but I liked visiting there. So I'd done a number of courses in London that gave me regular reason to visit. Then I did a master's in healthcare management, which was like the MBA but in health. So that was another couple of years where I got to go to and fro. Then I did a reflexology qualification because I wanted to do something non-academic and completely different. And I guess that took me back to people and, touch and closeness, and just really enjoyed doing something completely different. And then having done the careers, you're frowning beautifully now.
No, I was just thinking about reflexology. It's all I know about it is the manipulation of people's feet.
Yeah,
Uh,
working with different energy points
that's
that
the
correspond to
yes.
parts of the body.
Yes. I remember reading up about it quite recently to try and just get an understanding of what it was, because
Mhm.
what is the theory behind reflexology? I don't understand it. So yeah, I was just trying to do a bit of research as to what was involved, and it's just funny how you've mentioned that
Ah,
it's something that you
maybe
did.
somebody's telling you should go and try some reflexology. It's a wonderful thing to experience. So, I strongly recommend it to anybody, particularly for relaxation, even not just for, not if you have things that you want, to resolve. And then to go to the complete opposite end, having done the career masters in effect, and doing something completely different with the reflexology, I then did a master's for fun, which was in medical law. So, and we did that at weekends. So that was completely bonkers. Met some great people, learned some great stuff. And alongside then, I would have been doing some different qualifications around coaching, one of which was to do various levels of training in neurolinguistic programming, which was an area that I work in coaching. So all of those things started to just develop my thinking, my attitude to life, where the opportunities for change might arrive. There had always been an element of coaching and mentoring in any of my leadership or management roles. And so in 2014, when I had the opportunity to be made redundant, actually setting up a coaching practice was absolutely the thing that I really, really wanted to do. So it was time to leave it all behind and go into that real playground of setting up your own business, which, as I'm guessing a number of your audience will know,
Yes,
is where
yeah.
learning really begins.
With
You really find out who you are.
the fun really starts with the setting up your own business. Was that sort of like a, I guess, you sort of mentioned there was that moment at which you realized you wanted to do something different. Would you say that there was any kind of like entrepreneurship or seed of going it alone within you? Because obviously you've worked public sector for quite a long time. You didn't sort of go public sector, private sector. You just went public sector out on your own. There's a sort of, to me, it seems like quite a big jump, I think.
It was a big jump. It
Yeah.
was a huge jump. I think somewhere in the perhaps the only thread, well, other than the coaching and mentoring, which I mentioned had been a natural progression throughout my career. I suppose the other thread is that because so much of the work I'd done in the last 10, 15 years of my public sector career, 10 years certainly, was around change management. There was perhaps more an element of intrapreneurship rather than entrepreneurship, where you are looking at how you lead change from within. That I think did have, I still didn't appreciate it would form such a large part of my own business. Looking back now, I can see that was, quite a strong, quite a strong thread. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of that leap from public sector to own business. One of the biggest challenges was simply the fact you could now choose your own label. I'd gone through a hierarchy throughout the whole of my career where I had a job title and a job description. Everybody had some sense of what that meant and what the order of things were that underpinned that label. Suddenly I didn't have a label. And if I did use a label like coach, everybody assumed you were like the same as the other 9 gazillion coaches that are out there. And you'd go to networking events, people go, "Oh, all the coaches are over there." And I'd think, "Well, they're the last people I want to talk to. I want to talk to everyone else." I know coaches, I know what coaches do. I'm trying to find out what the rest of the world does. So yeah, for absolutely, I think probably the hardest challenge was working out what I wanted to be, not who I wanted to be, but what I wanted to be known for. And then putting some language and description around that that made sense to people who might actually want to buy my services.
Yeah, so I suppose you've kind of gone through public sector life, redundancy. Speaking from, I guess, family experience, being made redundant from public sector, you a comfortable buffer, you could say,
Yeah,
to
comfortable.
sort of kind of ride you through to kind of put that time in. So yeah, what was the sort of obviously you've not gone to Thailand to find yourself, but what was the process of finding your niche? Like, what was the steps that you sort of went through to think, I want to do coaching, but how do I put that in front of people, and what do I sell myself as?
I think a large part of it was working out what I wanted to be known for. So even within coaching, almost as within so many professions, there are so many different niches, and trying to, there was definitely a part of me that was kicking back against what people would probably think I'd want to be known for. Would have been easy and I've seen other people do it very, very successfully, and more successfully than me, use the links that they've got in that 20-year previous history to build that career. Well, I wanted something completely different. I just didn't realize how completely different could be so difficult. That was a huge challenge. And would I do it the same way again? Maybe not. Maybe I'd have been a little wiser. I'm not saying I threw my teddies. I walked away very elegantly and happily, because I knew it was my time, and it was what I would have worked towards. So there was no difficulty from that point of view, but not appreciating the scale of the challenge was definitely the thing to work through. So there was trying to identify what I wanted to be known for, what I was good at in that context. Then there was the challenge of how do you get known, and who do you want to be known by? So, both in and out of Wales, who are my people now? I've had a whole career where I knew everybody that mattered, really. And suddenly you feel like you know nobody. And you've got to build this thing called a network and make that work for you. And you can be the best people person in the world, but you've still got to make friends with the right people to create connections that actually are purposeful, meaningful in some manner, and, not to put too fine a point on it, are going to put food on the table. Though it's the blend of those things that I think are the big challenge as a business owner, aren't they?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's something that people don't necessarily realize the importance of networking and meeting other people and speaking to other people. Like in my work, as a web design developer, what I think a lot of people who are also doing the same work as I am, they want to be the best developer out there. For some, there's a niche that really want that. But for the sort of work that I do, which is dealing with 20 different clients any given week, jumping from this
Yeah.
project to that project to that project, people don't want the best web developer. They want the best communicator who
Yes,
can build websites, and they want someone
that's
who can
absolutely
keep
right.
them updated on this is what's happening on your project, this is what's happening on your project, this is what's happening on your project, and I've done this, and this, and I've done this, and this in a language that they can understand. What they don't want to know is, oh, well, I had, 7 compiling errors and this has happened, but don't worry, I've upgraded you to the latest version of this and that's happened. I don't care. Have you
Yeah,
got the work done? And
you're
something that
so
I
right.
kind of realized quite early on was I don't have to be the best web developer, I have to be the best communicator
Communicator. Yeah.
to get the work and deliver the work. And as long as I can do the work and I can do it to a high standard, then people are far more interested about how I communicate. So yeah, I think that it's such an underrated skill for any level of freelancer, business owner, is that ability to talk to people and communicate with people. So yeah, I think that's, yeah, like you say, that is that is really important and such a
But and I'd go one step further, Alex. It's also about how we communicate with ourselves,
okay.
because all of that comes from, any communication comes from how thinking affects our behaviours. So that internal machination, our internal deliberation with ourselves, is just as important as our communication externally, because we are quite often really brutal to ourselves. That impacts how we do business too. So that internal communication, and actually being a bit kinder to ourselves, being, being a bit more realistic, kind, compassionate, all of those things, I think are really important as business owners,
Yeah.
because they're the things that if we get it right within ourselves, it makes it so much easier in terms of how we communicate with other people.
Oh
But
yeah.
we often look externally and don't do the inner work. Um, Not that I'm touting for business there, I'm just being honest about how it works.
It's fine. It's fine. Um, so yeah, I guess really we really want to look at, where did you land with that? Like, you've kind of analysed, you've assessed, you've wanted to kind of be the best. What was your pitch then for people? How were you going after work when you first started?
I think that I think when I first started, I went for anybody who talked to me probably. I dread to think how clumsy some of those initial conversations were. And then gradually you do start to find people who need what you offer, who are in that stage where they are. I mean, coaching is about having a conversation. If it follows the theme that we're discussing, it's recognizing that there's something different out there that you either want, or that something different that you want to be, that is different to where you are now. So how are you going to get there? That's the simplest thing. Now, I have a coaching mentor in the States who I've heard several times say you can achieve the same thing by talking to a lamppost. You don't have to pay a coach to go through that thought process. But what a coach will do is to hold up a mirror to things that we can't see. Maybe they'll ask a question. I often hear coaches ask about killer questions. Well, I hate that, because I think sometimes all somebody needs is somebody to sit quietly with them and allow them to do the thinking that actually otherwise they don't do. Finding people who are in that place where they are either ready to do work on the change that needs to happen, or to do the work on themselves. Sometimes takes time, sometimes it comes through, sometimes it's about direct conversations, sometimes it's about watching where people are at and just getting to know them, and being around them and being ready when they are. Sometimes it's about referral. And gradually I would get referral and recommendations from previous clients, not just for coaching, actually, also for training and lecturing, because I tended to be out there saying something different around leadership, which was about, personal leadership coming from within, not from the structure and organization that we tend to put around it when we work in big organizations like public sector. And I gradually realized, and it did take me some time, mostly because Andy Murray was my ideal client. So I never wanted to position myself to women in case he knocked on the door. And then after a while, I realized he probably wasn't going to knock on the door anytime soon. So I accepted that most of the people I was working with were women, not because I was marketing to them, but because that's who I was attracting. And largely women who were leading change, because that's the work I'd done and understood, and know what it is to hold yourself back when you can see something that actually needs doing, or you have some sense of calling of what you want to do in the world, but your own mental monkeys will hold you back from delivering that. So I know what that feels like. I know what the frustrations are, through working with my own mental monkeys and helping other people with theirs. There's nothing better than disrupting other people's thinking. I love it. So to have that opportunity and help them to bring to life that thing that's really important to them, it's an incredible opportunity in the world. It's just a wonderful. It's the best job in the world. I can't put it any more strongly than that. Of all the things I've done, and there are a few as we've worked through, coaching is definitely the best job in the world. And the beginning, I loved the solitude of that one-to-one work with clients. Then I did some work with groups, and then after a while, it was like, well, actually, I'm missing being part of a team, which was where my work with Practice Solutions came in. And I saw them advertising for associates one day. I thought I could work with them for a few days a month. That would be a good way of still feeling part of something and meeting new people in a professional setting, using skills that I'd had from previous career, but without selling out to having my own practice. They felt as though they aligned really well. And I went for their open day, and just everybody I met was just lovely. The values were so well aligned. It was easy to see how you would fit in. So I forget how long for. I'm always asked this question. I still don't know. But I joined them as an associate, doing 3 days a month on a new project for them. That was a perfect division of labour in many ways. And then COVID happened, and I was asked to join the leadership team on a temporary basis to do some work around what the long-term strategy needed to be. like any of us really knew that as we went into the pandemic. I think it's 5 years on, I'm still there, but not on a temporary basis. I did join so I'm part of the executive team on a part-time basis, and I head up the strategy and communication team there. I have the most wonderful team in the world, just in case any of them listen, but they know I'd say that even if they didn't, because I work with the creative and entrepreneurial types who are brilliant at what they do, and help make a real impact in the public sector too now.
What is again going back? What is it? What is your average day? So you said before, being sort of nursing manager, a lot of meetings. um, what
Yeah,
is?
it can still be a lot of meetings actually. A lot of meetings around the future of the company. What's our current strategic direction? Current strategic, is that an anomaly? But working with the team, making sure again that we have skilled individuals, not just in our core team, but also we have a really large team of associates and consultants now. So looking at the type of work that is coming towards us, the type of work that our clients are going to need in the future, and how do we match those skills and capabilities to the projects that are likely to come our way. And we work on a really broad base of projects, all that are around improving public sector services, but that can be anything from research and evaluation, workforce and leadership development, through to videography, event management, and graphic design. So we have a really, really broad range within the team. And again, I love that because it means that I get involved in a really diverse range of conversations, both with the team and with our clients.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like your sort of career has definitely been defined by not staying in one place for too long, itchy feet, sort of staying in something for a little bit and then no, there's something, that looks good, or just sort
So
of
Practice Solutions is heading up for being probably the longest thing I've done actually, and I
okay.
think that's because if I was going to if I was going to go back to within a team, I can't imagine being anywhere than in that team, because our chief exec is fantastic, as is my fellow directors. It's just a really lovely group of people to work with, and we attract great associates, actually, and great clients. What's not to love?
Is there anything about the public sector work that you preferred over the current private sector work that you
Oh,
do?
interesting.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
If there is, I'm struggling to think what it is. I think it's more that it was about doing the right things at the right time of life. That's my, that's the answer from the heart, if I'm honest. I'm immensely proud of what I did in the public sector and what I achieved there as part of a team who do incredible work. I'm equally happy that I left at the right time for me in terms of the contribution I wanted to make. And I feel similarly now that I never say balance because I think balance is a bit of a holy grail, but with the blend of things that I now have across my work with Practice Solutions, my own coaching practice, the podcast we talked about earlier, and now the course that I'm running to try and improve how podcasting works too. Yes, there is another theme. It's not just about itchy feet. I also have that need to improve and make a difference. I think those are the things that I'm confident have come up at the right times for me with the skills and capabilities that I've had at each point.
Yeah, so let's kind of go, I guess, back a bit to the
Mhm.
podcast. What was the sort of the driving force that made you think I'm going to do a podcast?
Oh, everybody telling me I should do one. If I'm really vain, it was because they said, with your voice, you should be doing one. And that never felt like it was enough, that I'm being really vain there. It's like, I don't think you can just do a podcast because you have a nice voice. That didn't feel right for me. So I was very, very slow to give in to the pressure to do it. And then I was invited to co-host a podcast, maybe 6 years ago, with somebody who's really tech minded. So we did a leadership podcast called On the Tipping Point. And Sherry had her own podcast for a while. So she was really in the flow of things, but wanted to do something that was co hosted. So she would do all the tech, she'd do all the editing, I'd do the show notes. The division of labor was easy, perfect. And then unfortunately, she got sick. So we only did, I think, 12 episodes. And then I paused again. Not paused, I like to say I podcrastinated for quite some time. I think it took 4 years of discussion for me to go, okay, I'm ready. I'm now ready. And one of the catalysts in that I remember very clearly was, I'm sure you'll smile, but that moment in the kind of in the immediate run up to the pandemic, where everybody was buying everything from Amazon in case Amazon never delivered ever again. And mine was a microphone and headset. It's like, what if I couldn't? Suddenly, if somebody said I couldn't launch the podcast, that was no good. Suddenly I had to take action. It still took me another year, but I had everything ready in case I was good to go. And I still had to work out what the purpose of the podcast was and where it fitted. And just that, I had this really deep sense that sharing women's stories was really important, because although there are lots of podcasts that talk about stories, there aren't, I guess there are increasingly so, but at that point there were not lots that were talking about the resistance specifically that women feel to making a difference. There are so the voices, the mental monkeys, the sense that they're not good enough, that they're not yet ready, that they're not enough is often compelling and outweighs the work that they could do if they simply got started. And I was away on a retreat somewhere in the run up to this. I was up in Yorkshire on this amazing retreat, and there were, I think, 7 or 8 of us that were participating. And it was run by a coach who was combining his coaching skills, which are he's just wonderful, with his interest in videography. He set up the 2 days, and in addition to being in this beautiful mansion house, there was one room that was set aside for our work together, and the work involved being sat in a darkened room with a single camera and a single chair, and he was operating the camera. And on the Saturday, we were set a question, and I think you had like up to 15 minutes to sit in front of the camera and just talk on the answer to that question. And that felt daunting enough. And I went quite quickly because I thought, we're going to be here all day. If I don't go first or second, I'll sit here all day thinking what I ought to say, and therefore I'll miss being present for everybody else. So on the Saturday, I went really early. The downside of that was on the Sunday, we went in reverse order. And on the Sunday, you had up to an hour in front of the camera and no question. So I had all day thinking, what am I going to say when I sit in front of this single spotlight? And I still didn't know. And I'd spent like 6 hours or something waiting for my turn. And we went to the afternoon tea break, and I spent the whole time thinking, just have a sentence. If you have a sentence to start, then it will take over. You just need to know where you're going to begin. So I went back into the room with my sentence all planned. And as I drew breath, this alarm went off in the house. So we all had to go and find the source of the alarm, come back, settle down, darkened room, single light, single chair. And I start telling this story, and I have no idea to this day what I shared. But it was kind of quiet. The atmosphere was really intense. Everybody's hanging on my every word. So, and whatever I'd said suddenly resulted in me exclaiming, and I'm not small. And it was like nobody knew where it had come from. There was just this moment I realized that David was crying behind the camera.
Okay.
I didn't really know what had kind of overtaken in that moment.
Hmm.
The room was just agog with like this kind of quietness that had suddenly erupted. And as I drove back, then I knew that the next part of my personal mission, Women on a Mission, was about helping women not to be small. And so sharing those stories became a really important part of my work. Hence the first 101 episodes, as you kindly started by recognizing. It's been an incredible journey, talking to people that I know, talking to many people that I don't, the opportunities that podcasts give you, as we're demonstrating today, to meet somebody and just talk and chew over with somebody you've never met, but really honestly and openly. I think that is quite incredible.
I think for me, it's been like you are the first female guest that I've had
That have not
on
escaped my attention, the
the
pressure.
podcast. Well, it's been. I've been very conscious over the last 8 episodes that I've been speaking to exclusively men and trying to vary it, but despite. So, I don't know if this is a gender thing or maybe just a me thing or the people I've been asking, but the women that I've been asking to go on the podcast that have, I think, great stories have gone, oh, I don't think I've got a story to tell. I don't think my story is very interesting. I don't know if I can tell, I don't think people would want to listen to that. It's like, no, I really genuinely think you've got a great story to tell. I'm not going to force you into doing it. But it's just been almost every man that I've asked to come on has gone, yeah, sure, I'd love to tell my story.
Yeah. I've listened to some of them and they've been great stories.
Yeah, but I've just had such a hard time
Yeah.
getting a woman to come on, just to actually be confident enough, or to make that leap of telling the story over a call.
Well, I've got a whole list of women who'd love to be interviewed by you, Alex, so that's no problem at all. Anytime you need a bit of balance, let me know.
Yeah,
I'll
so I
give you
do.
referrals.
I'm trying to vary it up as much as possible. But yeah, it's interesting that you sort of say that women need that kind of boost, because I've definitely found it trying to book
Yeah.
people to appear on this, that there's just not as many women who are as happy and as confident to talk about their stories, and
And
to
that's one
appear
of
on
the
podcasts.
reasons. That's one of the reasons why I've set up my Guest Quest program.
Mhm.
No, it's not. Again, it wasn't originally marketed for women. The beta group that I've worked with, however, were all women, and all the women who I also ran something called a Pitch Perfect Power Hour. All of those, all of the queries and bookings have been with women, and yet I'm not marketing it directly at women in the least. But it is women who recognise that nervousness, that anxiety about sharing their story. I think about wanting to do their best as opposed to coming and talking about, just coming and sharing their story. They want to do it in a certain way, or feel there's a right or wrong, or what if they get it wrong for you, and trying to dispel some of those myths. And actually, having written the course, I genuinely thought, for anybody who might want to buy it, I've now written a book proposal, and I will target that to female founders. Because I think there is actually stuff around not gender pay, but gender funding that is relevant in terms of pitching the book, but also because most commonly those are the women I'm working with. So in terms of case studies for the book, or people who'll be interested in learning more about being a good podcast guest, I think there will be a female audience. So that's where I will pitch it. But I've just had, I don't know about you, I just find out the quality of pitches that I receive is so poor. When people send it, and I get so angry. I do get angry. Not many things make me angry, but I do have an absolute rant about agencies that try and pitch men to my show. Like, people are paying good money to go to agencies and get guest slots, and they're sending them to me. I interview women. It's the clues in the title. And if somebody doesn't know my name either, when my name's in the title, woe betide. It sounds really egotistical, and it's not meant to. I just get frustrated for the people who are out there looking for interviews and are being really poorly served. And I also am really conscious that from a host point of view, there are two major traumas. One is, how do I get more downloads? And number two is, how do I get my guests to share the episode? I promise to, by the way.
Thank you.
You'll have no problem on that score. So I think, I think all of those things are really important from both a guest and a host point of view, and getting great matches for people who want to not only share their story, but don't be a hit and run guest. Actually share your story and then share the show, and
Yeah.
and do the work for the host who's given you the opportunity. So
Oh, yeah. I think everyone has been very good in sharing
great.
their episodes, apart from one person. I
Oh,
didn't
no,
share.
don't name and shame.
I won't even shame. But yeah, apart from one person, they've all been really good at sharing this.
I always know who will, though. This might be a top tip. I don't know. Um, I find that there's a point in the show where I'm doing the kind of thank you, or maybe just slightly afterwards, and they'll say, "Did you get what you need?" And in that moment, I know that they've done it for me, not for them.
Okay.
They never ever share. Anybody who's ever said that to me has
Hmm.
never shared the episode. And I find that a really interesting insight. It's like a little clue into if people feel they're doing it for you, as opposed to it's an asset or a piece of the jigsaw for them.
I guess the only sort of final question, and I've changed. So normally, when I ask people if you could go back and do it all again, would you do anything differently, or would you like to have ended up anywhere else? But it now seems like such a silly question, because the answer was always no. I'm exactly where I want to be. So I think really kind of looking back at your story, and the fact that you went from nursing, you loved that, management, going straight out of there, coaching. You've done all of these varied things. Is there anything else at any point in time you wish you'd kind of stopped off at in between? So
Oh,
any other career paths that you think, oh, you know what, I really would have liked to have tried that at some point, rather than the path, because it's been an S-shaped path all the way through.
imagine that. Imagine that when your name's Sue. The only thing that I guess occasionally sleeps into my mind, not in any regretful sense, but probably something that I wonder if I'd known then what I know now, would I have done differently? And I might have enjoyed a career in music.
Okay.
I've been very fortunate. In fact, we met through Jamie Thomas. Jamie and I met through singing in a choir together, and I've been lucky to sing in some great semi-professional groups and choirs and bands. And I wonder if I'd known, back in much younger years, how good I guess my voice could have been. Maybe I'd have done more there. I've been very lucky to sing in some amazing places in the world, and I've performed at a number of friends' weddings and just had an amazing time with my voice. So I just think, had I known that at 17, would I have made some different decisions? Probably not, because I wasn't brought up in a family that would have enjoyed that. But yeah, just a little bit of me. If you push me, I'd go, oh, I wonder. The performer in me might have done a little bit more than she has.
The performance side of Sue, yeah. I think it's nice to hear. I always think that people, because when I started asking that question, I did think that people would sort of say, oh, music, acting, traveling the world, all of this sort of stuff. But people generally, ended up roughly where they want to be. But it is nice to hear that, yeah, music is something that I feel like people do love so much, and it's such
Yeah.
an aspirational skill to have. And yeah,
I
if
did
you could,
once busk a trumpet solo at somebody's wedding. That was hilarious. Nobody knew I could play.
okay,
It was a wedding full of musicians, and I was
okay.
the soloist for the ceremony. And then in the evening, everybody was invited to perform,
Mm.
and it soon became clear that everybody was doing something different or funny or comedic. So I was due to sing again in the evening with a friend who was playing the trumpet and a keyboardist. We went out into the car park to do it. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Everybody else is doing something amazing. And Julian said, oh, you should play my trumpet. And I was like, tip, you're ridiculous. I haven't picked up a brass instrument for 10 years or something. That would be outrageous. So, but you could do it. You could just busk like the second verse. Just if you sing I was singing Summertime. And he said, if you sing the first verse straight, and then you will have a break, and Jim can fill in, and then you can just take the trumpet, and I'll just do some doobie-doos in falsetto over the top of it,
Mhm.
and it'll be a riot. So just practice now, see if you can play it. So I busked it in the car park. And right up until the minute I took the trumpet off him in the evening, nobody knew if I was going to do it, including me. I just didn't know if I was brave enough to do it in the moment. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. So I did. Just walked up to him, took the trumpet, and everybody was like, how did she do that? So which is a great way to go, how do you end up doing that, isn't it?
Don't
So
do that.
yeah, I don't do that. Yeah, just bust it.
May as
Um,
well.
Sums up my career, really. Just joking.
Oh, Sue, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, a treat, a delight, you could say.
Between all
Superlatives.
of those things, Alex, to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's all right. It's been so great listening to your story, and I'll see you soon, hopefully.
Cheers, Alex. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye.
So there we go. That was our conversation with Sue. I really hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you've got this far, please consider telling a friend, following the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. For some reason, it's there now. Yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop us a follow, leave us a good review, come back and listen again to next week's episode. There's another really good episode coming up next week. Should be a fascinating listen and a bit of an insight into the world of film and TV production. So yeah, I can't wait to put that one out into the world. Yeah, like I said before in the intro, there's a load of links in the episode description to some of the stuff that Sue talked about. If you want to ask any questions or get in touch, feel free to drop me an email to alex@howdyou.com. That's HOWDYOU.com. I'd be really interested in hearing from anyone who thinks they've got a good story to tell. That'd be great to get some more people on the podcast. And yeah, let's keep this going. So until next week, thanks so much. Bye.